All right, go ahead.
Good evening, and welcome to the May 18th, 2022 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. Before we start, if you and my colleagues could please silence your cell phones. Equipment for the hearing impaired is available up here by our secretary if you need that. And we have three meetings this evening. We have a Finance Committee meeting, an Administrative and Human Resources Committee meeting, and a Board of Commissioners meeting. One of the items on the Board of Commissioners meeting is the St. Charles Historical Commission element at the request of the applicant. That is going to get referred back to, I'm going to make a motion to refer that back to the Building and Planning Committee. So if you are here or listening for that, that is likely to take place on a different night. So with that, we will start off this evening with the Finance Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Zella.
Thank you very much, President Sinai. There are 5 items on tonight's Finance Committee agenda. I'm going to start with item 1, which is for the committee to consider awarding a contract for milling and paving of various township streets. I believe there are a few streets in our township that need to be milled and paved. Our Chief Financial Officer is not with us this evening, so we're going to go right to the top and call on our Township Manager to tell us more about this first item.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelov. This is also our largest item on this agenda tonight. It's the award of the contract for a milling and paving program for the current year. We knew very well that the prices were going to be going up for asphalt paving, since asphalt is an oil-based product, and the price of a barrel of oil compared to last year at this time has escalated considerably. But our prices have gone up in terms of a square yard price by 54% in this bid. That brings our total contract award that we have recommended to you this evening to $2,893,155.15 to be awarded to Alan Myers. Understand that in our paving program, money comes from different sources. So in terms of anticipation this year, we anticipate using about $1 million worth of highway aid funds. That's liquid fuels funds that comes from the state derived from a tax on gasoline. We also anticipate a little over $900,000 or more contribution from utilities. When they tear up our streets, then typically we have an arrangement where they restore the street to a certain standard to prepare it for paving, and then we do the paving as part of our program, so they pay us for that. Anyway, this price is obviously substantially over budget, since in October or November, when we were working on this budget, no one anticipated these kind of increases in pricing. But with the utility contributions and with what we have budgeted in CIP, which is $1.5 million, we're basically about $2.4 million in total for a $2.9 million project. So we will be over budget unless the board wants to scale back the approved list of streets to be paved. With that, I would probably turn it over to Public Works Director Paul McElhaney to add any additional information or answer any questions about the process.
Thank you very much, Ernie. Mr. McElhaney, before we go to you, I just observed that this is what we're being asked to approve is a requirements contract, so we're not obligated for the volume, but we are obligated for the unit pricing. And then just recently, we had a presentation on the roads to be repaved based on the Public Works criteria and those roads that have been disturbed, in some cases considerably so, by utility work. Paul, thank you for being here tonight. If there's more you'd like to add, thank you.
Just to add, before, when we first put the bid out, we anticipated our discussions with Eric, myself, and anticipated that we would, looking at the market, we would be somewhere around 2.4, 2.5. Our crystal ball was off. Our quantities have not changed. We usually do about the same volume per year, so the quantity really hasn't changed. If it has, it's minor. So this was surprising. We are doing an internal audit to make sure that all square yardage has been calculated. There are some not major, but there are some contributions that we will need to collect from the utilities, which we have not calculated yet, and the reason we don't do that is we wait till they're complete to make sure that they don't go into side streets and further than they anticipated on the drawings. So we're estimating what those are at this time so that we have a better number to give our CFO, so that he has a better idea of where the monies are going to come from. But it's not going to be $1 million or anything of that nature. But one of the major contributions that is still not calculated here is the stretch of Conshohocken State Road from Henry to Mill Creek. So that's a good stretch of roadway, as you know. So we'll have contributions like that still forthcoming once that's completed by the utilities. Other than that, we have spoken to the utilities because of the way that we calculate their contribution rate to us. One of the utilities is going out to bid this year for their paving. So once they have in hand what their bid cost would be, we'll take that information to help with our budgeting for next year. We've made them aware that our prices have significantly gone up. We would expect theirs to have gone up, and we'll be looking for the delta between what they currently contribute to what they will be contributing. We've already held meetings with each of the utilities, and we'll be continuing to do so because of the events that have occurred.
That's very helpful information, thank you. And if Conshohocken State Road is not included in that $900,000 of anticipated utility reimbursements, that sounds like that will be a significant additional contribution to by the utility.
It'll be a contribution, but the size of this, it won't be monstrous. So
Okay.
it's not gonna, you're not gonna go, wow, we just knocked $100,000 off or something of that nature.
So what's before us is with unit pricing and the area to be paved, the square yardage, a $2.9 million projected pricing, which will be funded in part by $900,000 plus from utilities, $1 million roughly from liquid fuels.
Correct.
So that leaves $1 million from the township.
Correct.
Okay. Committee members with questions or comments for either Ernie or Paul. Commissioner Bernhardt.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zeloff. Paul, quick question for you. Once upon a time, we were doing something, I may have the terminology wrong, microsurfacing. It was something other than the milling and paving. It may have been more experimental to see if that was a stopgap measure for certain roads and long-term potential cost savings.
Correct. We were
Right.
doing micro paving, and essentially what it was is, think of your driveway coating, hate to use the analogy on steroids, and it had a thicker coating, more materials in it. It was a trial to see. I would say that we were not satisfied with the results that we were getting, so we've suspended doing so at this time until we see a change in the change in the product, change in the technology that we're more satisfied with by looking at neighboring communities that may be doing it.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then I'd be remiss if a little bit out of the lane here. There are a number of emails that I'd sent to you over the past week that you were so kind to respond lightning fast. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything we can do to help.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Other commissioners with questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Paul, this is a good opportunity, I think, to ask about the schedule, since summer's upon us, and there's a lot of milling and paving each and every year, including this year. So when do you anticipate being able to get started?
Well, we are scheduled to meet with the folks from Allen Myers tomorrow. so that we can discuss their thoughts on the paving schedule. We would like to start, again, after school completes sometime. Usually, we're hitting the first week of 4th of July, right after the 4th of July is what we're looking at, and then trying to accomplish as much as possible by September before school starts. I will say that there are key roads like Conshohocken State Road that we have earmarked that we want those completed during August before we get into the school season. So we have several roads such as that we're going to be coordinating with the Myers Corporation that we want as a priority. We'll have to work out the logistics to be able to mill and pave them. But as I said, we're meeting with them tomorrow. We're going to get our first blush at what their thinking is. They'll see what ours are for priorities, and also the layout that we have, how we want to proceed through the township, because we've been doing our preparatory work for our inlets and manholes in a circuit, and we want to have them follow that circuit.
And on the other end of the schedule, meaning once school has already returned in the fall, there's milling and paving still to do. For example, Lancaster Avenue through Bryn Mawr, because that work isn't projected to be completed until early fall, and it's vital that that milling and paving occur before the cold weather sets in and milling and paving can no longer occur.
And that is independent of this. That is through PennDOT, that milling and paving. Our milling and paving, once we get into past the beginning of the school year, what we anticipate, we as the township, we're going to be less traveled side streets, secondary streets is what we have, so that they'll start after school goes in, but it won't be major traffic ways or anything of that nature. As to Lancaster Avenue, our last discussion with PennDOT was that they are committed to get done before the end of the year, before they can, before paving season concludes. They did indicate they're going to be able to mill during the day, but they are going to have to pave the roadway during the evening. That's going to be an overnight project.
Understood.
We don't have a duration yet. Last time we spoke, they were working on a schedule, an anticipated schedule between the utilities, giving them information so that they can set their dates and times, and what does that mean. So it's being coordinated, and they've told us that it is scheduled for this year's paving schedule with PennDOT.
Great. Thank you. And I make one other observation, not suggesting action this evening, but with $1 million of township funds to be used beyond utility contributions and beyond the liquid fuels funds that we get from the state, this is to me, an ideal source of funds for this would be our ARP funds we could allocate to this significant amount of paving, and it's higher than expected due to the 50% increase in unit prices. So I wanted to throw that idea out there, and with that, ask if there's any public comment on this. Yes, ma'am, please come forward, preferably to the microphone over here.
Hello. It's more of a question than a comment. Adrian Seltzer, Wynnewood. I know I've been driving around the roads here in Lower Merion for 30 years, and it can't just be me who feels that once you get done a paving job, it seems like it's 2 weeks later that some utility or some company is digging up the road. And I was wondering, what is the process to get schedules from outside contractors and everything like that? I know we can't do anything about emergencies, but what is the process to make sure that the roads stay nice for more than a short period of time? So that's my question.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Seltzer. Any other members of the public wish to come forward? Jody, any online?
I do not see any online.
All right, a good question's been asked. There's a lot of frustration by our community about the impact of our roads, much of it because there's a tremendous amount of utility work in Lower Merion Township. and even surrounding communities that impact drivers and make it a very frustrating experience at times.
Understood, and as PICO has indicated, they have certain mandates that have to be met by, that have been given to them by the PUC, retirement of certain styles of gas lines and so forth. Unfortunately, this generation is the generation of a lot of infrastructure improvement, and they're working diligently to do so. Our process that we follow as a township is we meet with both PICO and Aqua several times a year. We have coordination meetings where they bring forward any proposed projects for the next 2 to 3 years. Now, that's not to say that they won't get something from the PUC that requires them to jump onto bring in an additional project that we hadn't discussed. But that said, they work with us and they tell us what they're proposing, where they want to be. We let them know what we may have proposed in those areas, because we may have sewer line repairs, those type of items, infrastructure repairs of our own. So we meet 2 to 3, if not more times a year, in person, everybody in one room, PICO, Aqua, it's so that everybody sees what everybody's doing. That said, you can't help emergencies, someone decides they want to convert to gas later, we have someone has a sewer main break or something of that nature. That said, if someone comes in, there's a 5-year degradation fee, and it's a scale. And if you want to break ground within the first year, there's a so much per lineal foot fee that they must pay as a penalty on top of the permit fee. So the utilities are very diligent in making sure that we haven't paved anything in the last 5 years before they do an infrastructure improvement, because they don't want to have that additional cost on their permit. So that is verified when they come in with their permits for each project, whether there's a degradation fee involved or not. And we're diligent in that if we pave this half of the street and then go the other block and they come partially into the block that we pave, we penalize them for it. So we're very diligent in keeping track of that. We work hand in hand with them to make sure that they follow the policy of trench restoration. If, as you know, the trench has to settle. Once the trench settles, they then fix the trench. They will take care of the settlement. They will take out the asphalt that's there. They will put in new base, but they're also required to go 6 inches each side of the restoration. They're required to fill that with the new top, the wear course, and to seal it. In many other communities, that's all that's required of them. What we do, as Manager McNeely indicated earlier, we make them pave the lane that they've taken and done work in. We ask for that. That's where the contribution comes from. So not only do they restore to the point where they do in many other communities, we have that additional that they pay for the paving of our roadway in its full lane width.
Thank you for that explanation. And it's the case that no utility can disturb a road in our township without a permit from the township.
Correct.
And Public Works is able to delay a permit if there are traffic and other impacts. Is that correct?
It's not so much that we can delay a permit, because the utilities, we're restricted in our authority over the utilities. We can have conversations and have influence and ask them for consideration of, can you change your detour? Can we do, so they work with us to have a good working relationship and do their best to accommodate what we would like to see also. But sometimes their needs are just so great. Again, Conshohocken State Road, we mentioned earlier, when that was first brought forward, PICO wanted 9 months, Aqua wanted 6 months. Each wanted to go first and then let the other go. We, as the township, said, no, you're going to work in the same sandbox together, and you have 6 months. So go to a room, figure out how you're going to do it, figure out where you have conflicts with each other, then come to us with the schedule and tell us how you're going to make it work. And that's what they've done. So they're very accommodating to the best that they can be. One of the issues that they're running into right now is, especially due to COVID, is changing services, water services and gas services to homes. We're running into issues where homeowners won't allow entry into the homes. So they're unable to finish some of their project because they can't do the retirement of the old line and new line. So that's been a struggle for the last 2 years and has caused problems with projects.
Thank you again for that explanation, Paul, and I would say it's a very good thing that you are a township resident, so you know what residents and commissioners are experiencing, and the complaints that we as commissioners receive from residents about the condition of our roads, and we do our best to explain, but we're glad you experience them as well.
And when we meet with contractors here that are going to do the work, as I explain to them, I do live here, but I do drive around at night. I do, go visit friends, families have commitments. So I really see the roads. So as soon as I walk in the morning, expect emails.
We look forward to a very successful milling and paving season by Public Works to improve the roads that are on the list that was approved recently. So with that, I'm going to, and thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to move that the Building and Planning Committee the Finance Committee consider recommending to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for milling and paving of various township streets to the following bidder in accordance with the bids received on Tuesday, May 10th at 11 a.m. And the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer with the approval of the Director of Public Works to Allen Myers LP with the lump sum bid amount of $2,839,442.9 million without alternate items 1C and 1E of $53,712.25 for a total bid of $2,893,155.15. Do I have a second? Commissioner McComb seconds. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously.
Thanks.
Second item on the Finance Committee this evening is also about roadway maintenance. It's for considering awarding a contract for an annual supply of roadway maintenance materials, and it's a rebid. Ernie, can you tell us more?
Yes, commissioners might remember that these items, the first time we bid them, we received no bids. So we had to go back out and bid this contract again. Primarily, these materials are all stone, which are used for various purposes by our Public Works Department, repairing trenches, paving roads, making patches, all of those types of things that they do. It is a materials contract, so we estimate the amount we might use, but we'll only pay for that which we actually do require and use during the course of the year. So the estimate is $124,491.25. The low bidder is Glasgow Incorporated, and the recommendation is to make this award to Glasgow. If anybody wants to know what the individual types of stone and material is, Public Works Director is still at the podium over there, but recommendation is to make the award.
Thank you, Ernie. I did ask our Chief Financial Officer today about the unit pricing increase. He sent a chart that showed the pricing increase was between 9, 10, 11%, depending on the line item. I don't have that in front of me, but that's my recollection. Is that yours as well?
It is.
Okay. And I will note that this is actually that's right. So the unit cost is higher by those amounts. And again, this is a requirements contract, so we can use as much or as little as we choose. So do committee members have any questions or comments either for Ernie or Paul? Seeing none, do any members of the public have any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for the annual supply of roadway maintenance materials. It's a rebid to the following bidder in accordance with bids received on April 21st at 11 a.m. and the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer with the approval of the Director of Public Works to Glasgow, Inc., items 6, 7, 8, and 9, in the amount of $124,491.25. There were no bids for items 10, 10A, 11A to F, and therefore the earlier amount is the total bid. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. The motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none in the way of opposition or abstentions, Madam Secretary, that motion passes unanimously. All right, items 3 and 4 are in one memo, but there will be two separate motions. The first is for sanitary sewer manhole rehabilitation. I believe this is a service, not materials. Correct. So this is not something that, not a job, this is not work that Public Works will do. This is a job to be, this is work to be contracted out. And it's not requirements because it's specific locations. Okay. Ernie, do you want to tell us more?
You've done a good start. This is also an annual contract. We budget a certain amount of money every year to rehabilitate sanitary sewer manholes so that they're not leaking sanitary sewage out or leaking stormwater into the sanitary sewer system. Paul's crews inspect the system on a regular basis. Each year, we identify a number of manholes that need to be rehabilitated and contract this out. In this case, the low bidder is Advanced Rehabilitation Technology. Their total bid for the items we listed in the bid document is $150,804.40. And the recommendation is to award to them. In this case, a little bit of good news in that the award is combined with the next item we'll talk about overall is 1% under budget. So a little bit of good news compared to the paving contract.
Great, thank you very much. Paul, anything to add to that?
I would just add that our staff goes through, they rebuild the manholes as necessary, and then this is a liner that's put inside that is chemically coupled with the sewer lines that you'll look at for your next bid.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Committee members with questions or comments? Seeing none. Members of the public with questions or comments? Jody, any who online wish to speak?
No.
Okay. I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for sanitary sewer manhole rehabilitation to the following bidder in accordance with bids received on Tuesday, April 19th, and the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer with the approval of the Director of Public Works and the Township Engineer to Advance Rehabilitation Technology in the amount of $150,804.40. Do I have a second? Commissioner Courtney seconds. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that item also passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, and then referencing the same engineering memo and the total versus the budget, the next item is for the committee to consider awarding a contract for storm and sanitary sewer lining, also a service to be provided by a vendor. Ernie?
Again, as Public Works Director just described, this is a lining of the pipes. And this may entail a sanitary sewer pipe, or it may entail a storm sewer pipe. depending on what Public Works crews have identified as needed. This, too, is an annual contract that we do every year to keep our infrastructure in good shape. We're essentially putting a lining inside a pipe, creating a new pipe inside. The total bid for this project, which the low bid has been submitted by Vortex Services LLC, and their total bid for this work is $661,272.40. It is our recommendation to award to Vortex Services LLC.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, we have the ability to, with the use of camera technology, to determine lines that are leaking or otherwise need to be relined, but we don't have the capability to actually do the relining. Is that correct?
Correct. This is a chemical process that they use with steam and a bunch of other, it's a drawn-out process. They create a liner that has to be kept in certain conditions until it's heated and installed. So we don't have that technology. We go through on a daily basis. We're inspecting sewer lines on a daily basis, sanitary or storm lines. What this allows us to do is not have to remediate, not dig up those lines, so that we can address it from internally. Another benefit of this is a lot of times we identify areas where we have high infiltration rates. When we see the pump stations during a rainstorm, a given area where a pump station is, if we see a large water flow increase from other years, we'll go out and inspect those areas specifically, and a lot of times we'll identify leaks in the pipe, so we line them, which helps keep our sewer costs down also for our residents, because we're not treating stormwater that has gotten into the sanitary sewer lines. So this is a twofold benefit of keeping the system working properly, but also dealing with infiltration.
Right. The problem you referred to, which does occur in the large municipality to our east.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you. Do any committee members have any questions or comments? Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoll. Paul, quick question. Is there a limit on the number of times you can reline the sewer pipe as opposed, you describe it as a chemical process. So is it something that can be done on a continuing basis, or at some point do you have to rip up the line?
They can be relined. You do lose a little bit of diameter every time you do it, but you do get wear at the bottom of the line. We've had some that have been relined because this has been ongoing for many years. What usually precludes us from doing a reline is if the pipes had a serious break or fracture. Staff will go in and fix it, but it has to be fixed to such tolerances that the liner can go through. But the hope is that we continue with this process and don't have to replace as many lines.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McComb. Any other committee members with questions or comments? Seeing none, do any members of the public have any questions or comments? Jody, any online?
No.
Okay. I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners the approval to award a contract for storm and sanitary sewer lining to Vortex Services LLC in accordance with bids received on Tuesday, April 19th, and with the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer and the approval of the Director of Public Works and the Township Engineer. A total base bid of $414,317.75. Bid contingency items C1 to C3 in the amount of $19,500, and add alternates AL1 to AL5 in the amount of $227,454.65 for a total bid of $661,272.40. Do I have a second? Commissioner McComb seconds the motion. And before we vote, I'll just, to summarize, the total of this item and the prior item are coming in at 1% below the budget, which is nice to see in this inflationary environment. So the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, that passes unanimously. We are 4 for 4.
Thank you.
And going for one more item, that is for the committee to consider awarding a contract for a fire truck that will be used, owned by the township, but used by the Belmont Hills Fire Company. This, I believe, will be the third purchase of a fire vehicle that will be titled in the name of the township, but, and then leased essentially, but at no cost to one of our volunteer fire companies. This is a new approach to acquisition of fire apparatus that is certainly an improvement. So again, I'll call on our township manager, Ernie McNeely.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelov. As you said, this is the third of the fire engines that the township will buy and own and then lease to the fire companies. The old system was they bought them and we provided the money, but there were certain inherent risks to that, and that process was changed. This went out to bid. There were 2 bids received. As you can see in the memo, the low bid is KME apparatus at $977,756.36. The only other bid was by Pierce apparatus at $1,135,000. So KME is the low bidder. The Belmont Hills Fire Company recommends award. This is a squad pumper. So it's a truck that is a combination that has capacity to carry a number of firefighters to a scene. It has a expanded capacity to carry equipment to the scene, but it also has a pump that allows this truck to attack a fire similar to a straightforward engine pumper. So the recommendation from both the fire company and staff here is to award to KME apparatus.
Thank you very much, Ernie. This would replace a 20-year-old vehicle for the Belmont Hills Fire Company. Earlier today, I asked some questions of Ernie. This is almost $1 million, and this is not a ladder truck, as Ernie described. This is a squad pumper engine. We don't typically, or haven't, I should say, we haven't recently bought engines that are pumpers and squad, a squad, an engine that's a squad pumper. It's considerably more expensive than a straight engine that doesn't have capacity to have room for firefighters. And it's actually close to what we've paid recently for ladder trucks. But we have not purchased a vehicle like this in a number of years, and it is replacing like for like. It is a squad pumper that is replacing a squad pumper. And I understand that based on our apparatus policy, we will be seeking to acquire some additional squad pumper engines in the coming years for some of our other volunteer fire companies. So with that, do any committee members have any questions or comments? Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zelloff. And then one point which I think you may have addressed, drop. The fire apparatus policy is not just that we now at the township own the apparatus as purchased, but the policy itself was something that was set with all of the fire companies of what was going to be purchased and when, what was the shelf life and expectancy of the fire apparatus that we now possess, and when will it be necessary for it to be replaced. So this is part of something that was approved by the board quite some time ago as to what we were going to do as part of that policy. And then I will copycat you to a degree in that the subject of funding this through the ARP funds was something that was suggested and discussed at the last round when we were contemplating how to utilize those funds. And this is for an expense that services not just the Belmont Hills Fire Company, but they service the entire township the way our fire service operates. So when we go to take a look at the second tranche of those funds and how we are going to allocate them, once again, this will be something that I will guarantee will be brought forth for our consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Other committee members with questions or comments? Do members of the public have any questions or comments? Seeing none, Jody, any members of the public who are here online?
No.
Okay. And I don't think Ernie mentioned it, although I might have missed it, but the price, the bid price, the low price is still 7.2% higher than the budgeted amount. And that is due to, as noted in the memo, recent inflationary pressures, which should not come as a surprise to any of us. So, with that, I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
I apologize, Commissioner.
I will stop making the motion. I will start over in a moment and recognize Commissioner McKeon. I heard some rustling going on.
No, I will be very brief. This application is approved in the staff memo. It's recommended the fire, our current fire chief met with the fire personnel and fire department. It's consistent with our co-stars policy, which, just as a quick refresher, the Marion Fire Company got an engine back in 2021, which I believe was also that was a Pierce. And then back in 2019, there was the Penguin Fire Company also got a pumper, and that one came in, I think, a little bit over budget, but I think this is a very solid policy that we use where the township assumes ownership of it after we purchase it for the fire company. So I hope you all join me in supporting this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeon. And one of the differences is that the policy means that we are the purchaser of the equipment, not the individual fire company. So it goes through our purchasing process.
Right.
In addition to our ownership, just to amplify the point. So, seeing no other questions or comments from committee members, I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for the purchase of a new fire truck for the Belmont Hills Fire Company in the amount of $977,756.36 from KME REV Group in accordance with the apparatus policy. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bernheim. The motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, any abstentions? Madam Secretary, we're 5 for 5. That passes unanimously. President Sinai, that concludes tonight's business of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. With that, we turn to the Administrative and Human Resources Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you very much. I hope we can keep this momentum going, maybe go for 7 for 7. The agenda tonight, the first item is approval of the Township Manager's Employment Agreement and 2022 salary increase. I would move to consider to the Board of Commissioners to approve to execute the Township Manager's Employment Agreement for the period of January 3rd, 2022 through January 2nd, 2024, and the approval of a salary increase of 3.5% effective January 1st, 2022, and a one-time performance payment of $6,000. Do I have a second?
Indeed you do.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. At this time, I will turn over comments to our President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. So just by way of background, we renew our manager's contract every 2 years on cycle with the board reorganization. So that would put it at the beginning of January 2022. And we also determine pay raises each year, also going back to the beginning of the year by the time we review things. So we're now talking about 2022. And I'm delighted that we in Lower Merion have what I consider to be the top municipal manager in the region. And if we think back to the period prior to 2022, which is the year 2021, it was an especially difficult time to be a township manager, and a really remarkable performance in this township where I think we did not miss a beat and that really cannot be said for a lot of our peer communities. And while that is a testament to the hard work and diligence of every single employee in the township, it is also especially a testament to the man sitting to my right. And I think the board recognizes that. I think in general, the board recognizes that there's a steady hand leading the township here. It can be seen in our fiscal situation, our AAA bond ratings mentioned, and also a manager who is supportive in implementing the policy positions of this board and becomes incumbent on this board to deliver policy positions for the manager to implement. And we have a really terrific executive to do that. So I'm delighted that we are considering renewal of this contract and the pay for 2022 that's reflected in it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. And any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, follows unanimously. The second item is addressing approval for the Township Secretary's 2022 salary increase. And I would make a motion, consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of a salary increase of 3.5% effective January 1st, 2022, and a one-time performance payment of $3,000 for our Township Secretary. Do I have a second? Recognizing Vice President Gavin. And turn over comments again to our President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. I imagine all of us would agree. If you were to look up the definition of essential personnel in the dictionary, you would come up with our Secretary Jody Kelly as the picture under that. And I think last year that was quite literally true, where what we hear is that she was the person who was here when no one else was here, right? Because someone actually has to make the thing work. I've had the distinct pleasure of being in this chair for maybe 4 months now, and I have come to appreciate that, all the gremlins that make things just work are sitting down at that end of the dais.
Is that a short joke? Sorry.
That was not, okay.
Sorry.
I'm never going to finish now. Okay. So where was I? Right. So Jody keeps this board running. She keeps all of us on track. She supports all 14 of us, which we say this every year is no mean feat, and she makes it all just work. And I will also say that we have all appreciated her guidance, her advice, her good common sense, her organization, and certainly from my perspective, I think the true tribute is she is someone who knows how to manage her manager and keep us in line, which is hugely valuable. I think on behalf of the board, thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Any public comment? Seeing none, I would move this to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. And all those opposed, abstentions, this again passes unanimously. So that concludes the business of the Human Relations Committee. Thank you, President Sinai.
And thank you very much, Commissioner Churchill. So with that, I will call to order the May 18th, 2022 meeting of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, would be so kind as to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. O'Neill has asked to be excused. Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Courtney.
Present.
Mr. Gavin.
Present.
Mr. Grimes.
Here.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Here.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. McComb.
Here.
Mr. McKeon.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Present.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Mr. Zeloff.
Here.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So we will turn to approval of the minutes, and I will move that we approve the minutes of a special meeting of the Board of Commissioners held on April 6, 2022, and a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held on April 20th, 2022, as distributed. Thank you for the second, Vice President Gavin. All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that carries. The board met in executive session earlier this evening to receive reports from its professional staff regarding litigation, personnel matters, Lower Merion School District, coronavirus, and 1400 Mill Creek Road. The board met in executive session on Wednesday, May 4th, 2022, and earlier this evening to receive reports from its professional staff. Monday, May 30th, 2022 is Memorial Day, a legal holiday. The Township Administration Building and libraries will be closed for business. There will be no refuse or recycling collection. An Anything with a Plug recycling event will be held on Saturday, June 11th, 2022, from 9 a.m. until noon at the Keckle Public Works Complex, 1300 North Woodbine Avenue in Penn Valley. There will be a $10 fee per air conditioner, dehumidifier, or microwave, a $30 fee per CRT, LCD, LED TV, or computer monitor, and a $100 charge for rear projection. Or if you still have one, a wood console TV. If you have one, bring it to this event.
Please, so we can stop reading that line.
Everything else is free. That has a plug. The transfer station, the Scale House, will be closed that day to residents and landscapers who are looking to drop off refuse and recycling. Come a different day. So now we turn to the section of the meeting where members of the public may address the board on any non-agenda items, or any other public matters in which the township has jurisdiction or authority. And we would ask you to please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, unless you're representing a group, in which case we'll give you 5 minutes. Thank you.
Adrian Seltzer, Wynnewood again. I would like to address the board on behalf of the NAACP Mainline Branch as its vice president. And I want to present to you a resolution in recognition of Juneteenth. Whereas the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act was enacted by U.S. Congress on June 17, 2021, and signed into law to designate it a federal holiday. Whereas Juneteenth, also known as Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, and Jubilee Day, is one of the oldest celebrations of the emancipation of enslaved persons of African descent, and was so named for June 19, 1866 adoption of Black Independence Day in Galveston, Texas. And whereas Juneteenth is a significant opportunity to celebrate the achievements and contributions African Americans have made throughout our community's history and continue to make to strengthen our community and our entire nation. Whereas Lower Merion is also home to descendants of those enslaved persons. Whereas the United States of America, the state of Pennsylvania, the counties of Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware, and the townships of Tredyffrin and Radnor all recognize Juneteenth as an official holiday. Be it therefore resolved that the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Mainline Branch, requests that the Board of Commissioners for the Township of Lower Merion work towards incorporating equity into all facets of township business, purchasing, and ordinances. Be it therefore resolved that the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Mainline Branch, requests that the Board of Commissioners for the Township of Lower Merion will consider joining Montgomery County in celebrating this holiday by closing township buildings and having this observance of Juneteenth be a paid holiday off for township employees. Be it therefore resolved that the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Mainline Branch encourages the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Lower Merion to adopt and proclaim this resolution to underscore the freedom and dignity of every human being. and hopefully adopt it. We had sent this out to all of you, and you should have gotten copies. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Seltzer, and you're absolutely right. We appreciate that you sent it in to all of us. Any other public comment for public privilege?
Commissioners, thank you. My name is Rabbi Greg Lukowski. I live on the corner of Putnam and Lafayette in Marion Park. I'm here tonight on behalf of a couple of our neighbors, and I just want to thank, I think it was Commissioner Kramer who's helped us with this issue coming into this evening, and my neighbor, Dr. Yair Lev, who couldn't be here tonight. So we're here tonight to talk about a stop sign that we're asking to be put on the corner of Putnam and Lafayette. And I was going to tell a story about the other night when I was trying to cross the street and cars come zooming by on the sidewalk because we live on the corner there. However, at dinner tonight, my children asked me, "Hey, Dad, where are you going tonight?" And I explained to them what we're doing. And my youngest son, Yoni, looked up at me and said, "Finally, there's going to be a stop sign on that corner?" So we have 3 children. We've been here for 5 years. Our oldest is 15, our middle is 12, and our youngest is 7. And since we moved in, that corner has always been a problem. Except I've always been with my children crossing that corner. Now they're at the age where we live in this wonderful, amazing, beautiful neighborhood where they can go themselves to General Wayne Park. And the other day, watching my son ready to cross that street, 2 cars, what do you know, zooming by right down Lafayette and Putnam. So we're here tonight with some of our neighbors to ask that you add a stop sign to that corner to protect my children and the children of the neighborhood. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your time. My name is Jonathan Arend. I'm a physician in internal medicine, live across the street from Greg. I am the medical director for primary care and population health for one of the major health systems in the region. And in that capacity, my team and I are accountable for the health outcomes for over 200,000 people. And so part of what that means is not only taking care of patients as they show up on our door, but really promoting their health outside of the walls of the hospital, outside the walls of the doctor's offices. And so this involves things like considering gun violence and food insecurity in West Philadelphia to things like motor vehicle accidents in the suburbs. So as you may know, for the past 2 years or so, firearm deaths have been the #1 cause of childhood mortality in this country, but for the 60 years prior to that, it was motor vehicle accidents. And so when I come home from work at the end of the day, after being focused on issues like this all day long, and I see the same cars whizzing by my house in a community that's quite literally crawling with children, it's incredibly distressing. I worry about my 9-year-old daughter walking to school. Every morning when I send my 11-year-old son to walk to the bus stop, he has ADHD and he's a little out of it sometimes, and I worry every morning when I send him out that he's not going to look up and see the cars whizzing by. We actually moved recently from Manhattan, and our kids are trained to look at the pedestrian crosswalk lights, right? There aren't any here in our neighborhood, so I worry every day that they're going to get carried away and wander into the streets with these cars coming by. I think what some of the algorithms that we've seen that have been presented to us by the police and so forth don't account for the density of children in our neighborhood and the proximity to the park. So just looking at the number of cars that are going by. So it's really the denominator. I deal in numbers. My job that is concerning. We also have Nick Gomes, who is a board member of the Marion Park Civic Association, who is going to speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, hang on a second. So anyone else in the room for public privilege? Okay, so with that, we will turn to anyone online. So just please state your name and, yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So first, I'd just like to thank the board for their service to Lower Marion and their attention to the needs of our residents.
Yeah, sorry, if you,
Nicholas Gomes,
oh,
I'm
there.
a father of 3 young children with one on the way. And I'd like to echo my neighbor's concerns that I see traffic on our street. I've personally and frequently witnessed cars exceeding the speed limit by at least 10 miles per hour. I would say as many as 25% of cars speed through that stretch of roadway that we are discussing. And I confess, I myself have found myself accidentally going above the limit, tempted by the gentle jogs and descending slope of our newly paved road. Many children walk in the middle of the road, perhaps out of habit, since many streets in Marion Park don't have sidewalks, perhaps because we expect our quaint residential roads to be safe. There are also no painted crosswalks in our neighborhood, not that I would expect or want them, but because of that, children and adults expect to be able to cross the road, not just at intersections. Many children cross the road to reach General Wayne Park, neighbors' homes, and nearby schools. On behalf of the Marion Park Civic Association, as a board member, I'd like to read a statement from the board indicating a consistent, unified, and strong advocacy for traffic control measures on this section in question. It reads, "Thank you for taking the time to understand the Marion Park neighborhood safety issue outlined below, and from Gare Lev and other residents on General Lafayette Road. We appreciate your attention to this issue and your support in getting the necessary approvals and workarounds to increase the safety in our neighborhood. Marion Park has seen tremendous increase in young families, and the safety of our residents and children is our highest priority. In addition to the many families and young children living in the neighborhood, the proximity of General Lafayette Road to General Wayne Park causes a large increase in walking, bike riding, scooting, strollers, etc. Marion Park Civic Association strongly feels that the criteria for speed bumps or other traffic calming measures is necessary based on the proximity to the playground and the sheer volume of pedestrians and children traveling to the playground on a regular basis. Speeding cars in the center of our neighborhood, less than a block away from General Wayne Playground, is dangerous and would be reckless to ignore. The Marion Park Civic Association supports the request for permanent traffic calming measures on General Lafayette between Rear Road and Hamilton Road. Thank you for considering the safety of both our neighborhood and the residents." And I will just conclude by saying, my wife is a pediatric intensivist. She has treated child pedestrians that have been severely injured by roadway accidents due to speeding drivers. I'm an actuary by profession, and I understand risk in the laws of large numbers. And I can tell you that the absence of a stop sign poses a significant risk with a catastrophic cost that can be remedied with minimal investment. My wife and I both feel strongly that a stop sign is in order. I conclude my comments simply by pleading for your action on this matter, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Jody, is there anyone else online for public privilege?
Do not see anyone.
There is.
Oh, there is.
It says that B is the user. Hello. Good evening, can you hear me?
We can, but we cannot see.
I apologize, my camera is malfunctioning. I apologize. Am I still able to comment?
Yeah, please do. Just, please introduce yourself and make your comments. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. My name is Bev Vandenbosch. I live on Mill Creek Road in Gladwin. I'm not sure if this comment is good for this particular portion of the meeting or for the next portion, because I noticed you're talking about something relating to parking regulation requests in your upcoming agenda. But I just wanted to make a comment. I did send a message to Commissioners Courtney and Zeloff, and thank you so much, Commissioners, for all of your hard work. Lower Marion Township, I've lived here for 20 years in Gladwin and have enjoyed every year of it. But recently, I'm sure you're all aware, on Mill Creek Road, the bridge at Old Gulf Road has been out since September of 2021. And as I mentioned to Commissioners Courtney and Zeloff, there has been a tremendous amount of construction-related parking. We do understand that Aqua PA has been in the area laying irrigation lines. And typically before the road closed, before Mill Creek Road got closed due to the failure of the bridge at Mill Creek and Old Gulf, utility companies like Aqua and others were parking relatively close to wherever it is they were doing their work. Once the bridge went out at Mill Creek, in our section of the road, construction vehicles started staging, standing, parking, idling, putting flatbeds, depositing heavy equipment, depositing materials. And this created a nuisance on the one hand, but on the other hand, a safety issue. At the intersection of Mill Creek Road and Grays Lane, I don't know how familiar the board is with that section, but it's sort of a blind curve. And it's where, once the bridge went out, there were barriers put up saying, you know, road closed, bridge out, so many feet ahead. Just behind that was where all of these construction vehicles would park. It makes it very difficult for people to come into the road because it's on the right-hand side of the road as you enter. So you would make a left turn from Grays Lane onto Mill Creek. And, you know, I spoke to several neighbors about safety concerns because people kind of come flying by there. A lot of people, I don't think they believe that the bridge is out. So many people will just kind of come flying by there, but there's this blind curve with lots of heavy equipment and it makes a safety hazard there. Also, there was an obstruction at some point when there was a storm that took out the power to that section. And when PICO came in to try to activate the transformer at that intersection, they could not access the transformer because of all of the heavy equipment and materials that had been deposited by the contractor. So they basically had to block the other side of the road with their bucket truck, and they struggled considerably just to try to get access to that transformer. Meanwhile, Mill Creek Road on that section was completely blocked. So we're just, you know, asking generally on behalf of the residents of that particular strip of Mill Creek Road that there could be some sort of protections put in place by the township until the bridge gets repaired, because it appears as though it's become sort of the place that people have said, well, it's convenient, let's park here, let's stage here, let's idle our engines here, let's have our dump trucks sit here. And we're just appealing to the township to consider some measures to help mitigate the situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jody, do we have anyone else online?
Do not see anyone else online.
Okay, we had one set of comments submitted by telephone. You can call our township secretary with your comments. And Anita Aller from Bala Cynwyd called in and expressed 4 concerns. One about the vacancy of the Bala Theater in Bala Cynwyd, the roadway striping on Presidential Boulevard, the Adopt a Highway advertising signage that PennDOT put on City Avenue, and apartment buildings being constructed in Bala Cynwyd in the number of those. Does any member of this board wish to respond to public privilege? Commissioner Gilda Kramer.
Thank you, President Sinai. I want to thank my Marion Park neighbors for coming tonight to talk about a concern that we've been discussing for close to a year now, which is the safety at Putnam and Lafayette, which is, Lafayette is a street that is used as a cut through the through the Marion Park neighborhood. And it's one, that particular intersection has about 50 young children within one block of that corner. We've dealt with the township over speed assessments, and we've been told that under our existing policy, which was adopted in 2019 before I came onto this board, that they don't meet the criteria for traffic calming at this particular location, even though speeds as high as 45 miles per hour on this little residential neighborhood have been clocked. And even though there are about 50 children within one block of this corner. Our policy, in my view, does not adequately factor in the number of children in the immediate neighborhood, the density of the housing, the use of a street as a cut-through street. And in more than one instance, not only at this location, but other locations in my ward, where children walk regularly to get to the Cynwyd Elementary School or to get to a playground, this does not make our residents feel safe for their children. I believe that we need to revisit our policy and its application to make sure that it keeps our children safe and makes our residents feel safe in their neighborhoods. So I will be asking that this issue be brought forth to the board for consideration for this particular location, despite the fact that it's not going to be recommended under our existing policy.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, President Stein. I just wanted to quickly respond to Ms. Vanden Bosch. Thank you for, it's hard to know where to look. Thank you for alerting us to this and detailing the issue in your email. And just now, I actually, just this evening, forwarded your email and concerns along to our township manager and our director of public works. And we'll be asking them to review the situation and make some suggestions to Aqua and Pico about how we might better address this and what's possible in that event. So again, thank you for your patience, and we will be getting back to you soon.
Thank you, Commissioner Courtney. Commissioner McCann.
Thank you. I think about 2 years ago, I found myself in just about the same position that Commissioner Kramer's in today about the traffic calming policy, and I had hoped that the township would revisit it a couple years ago. We talked about some different changes to it, and what traffic safety did was, in lieu of revisiting the policy, they looked to put forward some roads that didn't meet the merits, but it made some exceptions for it. So in Belmont Hills, there was Ashland Avenue was the one in my ward that we had where it did not meet the merits, but it still had a rumble strip put in there. So I would hope that, that this issue could be tackled two ways. One, to look at possibly revising the policy. I think that certainly could be a worthwhile endeavor. But also, if it doesn't meet the merits, still trying to bring it forward anyway for a vote. I think stop signs, I think, are very cheap traffic calming as it goes. It's like $50 each or so, just as long as it's, and from an engineering perspective, as long as they actually work at the intersection. I think it's something that's certainly worth looking at. And sometimes you don't realize how dangerous an intersection is if it's near a park and there's a lot of kids there just because there's not a high volume of traffic. I mean, this is a secondary road off of like a secondary road. So, but anyway, I would look forward to seeing that application as either revisiting the policy or an exception or both.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Okay, so I will quickly add just a couple of comments. I think first, the issue of traffic speeding in the township and traffic safety in the township is a recurring and extremely important one. And I think those of us, especially who live on the, in parts of the township where all the streets cut through, and they are leafy, tree-lined residential streets, have recognized that the very people who cut through streets are in a hurry, and by definition, that's why they're cutting through, and so by definition, they speed, right? And we have many instances of this, and hopefully we can find a way to put a lid on what is really a problem in many places. And also, I'd like to thank Ms. Seltzer in the NAACP of the Main Line for putting forth that resolution and bringing it to our attention. Thank you. All right, so with that, we are now at the portion of the meeting where members of the public can address the board on any agenda items. And that would be any agenda items, including the Natural Features Code ordinance, because even though that's an ordinance, comments on that one show up in this section. So if anyone has any comments, again, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Does anyone in the room wish to comment on any agenda items? Yep, please come up.
Good evening. My name is Brian Fenstermaker. I am the president and CEO of City Avenue Special Services District. I'm also an Ardmore resident and a former volunteer on the Comprehensive Plan Committee some years ago here at the township. I'm actually here speaking today about the one Belmont property that's development proposal in front of you today. So just
speak up just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you. So I'm just here to talk about the One Belmont and the conditional use approval. As the president and CEO of the district, we look forward to supporting this project. It is a vital piece to the development within the district as a whole. We think moving forward with the step backs and the conditional use is just an important piece to the overall district's vitality. And so moving this project forward will be really important for the district as a whole. We would like you to support that. I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else in the room for public comment? Okay, seeing none. Jody, do you have anyone online for public comment?
Do not see anyone online.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the board wish to respond to public comment? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the items on the agenda. Thank you, everyone who commented tonight. For the consent calendar, would anyone like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Do you wish to? Commissioner Stevenson, do you wish to?
Yes.
Okay.
I do would like for 355 Lancaster.
Okay, so we're going to remove 355 West Lancaster from consent. Anything else being removed from consent? Okay. So I guess what we will do is we will start with, Jody, start with 355? Or
No, you want to approve the consent calendar, and then that will be done as part of the Building and Planning Committee.
Got it, okay. So
Earning that raise again next year already.
Trying.
she's going to extract all sorts of extra payments from me. Okay, so now I'm a little out of sequence. So Jody, help me here. Do we go to One Belmont first, or we're going to 355? Oh, sorry, there it is. Okay, consent. Okay, so thank you. Okay. That's what you're for. Okay, so I will move that we approve the consent calendar and that's amended and including the items from the earlier Finance Committee and Administrative and Human Resources Committee meetings. Thank you, Vice President Gaffron, for a second. And Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bernhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Churchill?
Yes.
Mr. Courtney?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer?
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. McComb?
Yes.
Mr. McKeon?
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Mr. Zillow?
Aye.
Mr. Sinai?
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. Okay, everyone, I have caught up and I've figured out where I am. So now we will turn to 355 West Lancaster Avenue. And before I make the motion, do we have any commissioner question? Well, I guess I will start with the motion. I'm going to move that we approve a preliminary land development plan dated October 4th, 2021, last revised March 18th, 2022, prepared by Site Engineering Concepts showing demolition of all existing structures and construction of a 4-story building with a 56,898 square foot footprint containing 4,740 square feet of ground floor retail space, 121 residential units, and 201 at and below grade parking spaces. There are conditions here that will be complied with on the final plan or as otherwise required. And do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zoloff. I think we have people from staff available to answer questions about this. I will turn to Commissioner questions or comments. Commissioner Stevenson?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, thank you. So I just have a couple of questions for clarification. One of the things that we talked about in building and planning was, one of the concerns was the left turn. And I know that staff would do diligence to go back and look at that study, and I just wanted to ask staff and the engineer to share in detail what is in place, and so what kind of thoughts have been put in place and already, so for the public.
Yeah, that is a great question, and I think it would be best answered by the township engineer.
So for the site access is the question, and the access, it does eliminate curb cuts on Lancaster Avenue. There's currently 2 curb cuts for the property for entering and exiting movements that do allow left turns presently. The modifications consolidate 2 properties and into 1 curb cut. And localize those turning movements in that one location, which is good. The traffic report did look at site distance for where they located the proposed access drive, the new access drive, and for a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which we know nobody does on Lancaster Avenue, they far exceed the PennDOT requirements for the desired site distance. So it is an optimal location. I even looked for higher speeds up to like 40 miles an hour, and it still meets the site distance requirements, which is important and good, especially when making left turns out of a site. The proposed driveway is classified as low volume. There's about 714 weekday trips associated with the site, and 360 or so on the weekends. And when you're looking at the peak hour, you're looking at about 18 cars that would be making a left out of the site. This does have to go through a PennDOT process. It needs to be safe. It needs to meet all PennDOT requirements. They did have preliminary discussions with PennDOT, and they once they go through they still have to go through the review, but they did recommend that location, and they support the consolidation with the Chimicles property as well. We do also, as part of one of our conditions, ask for a post-development study for all these projects along Lancaster Avenue, this one included. And we can do a second review once it's in place, and if the adjustments need to be made, we can do that at the time based on the study. I don't foresee any adjustments needing to be made, but again, it's belt and suspenders. We built that into our review, and we want to make sure that all concerns are addressed.
Great. Thank you. Mr. President, I have no other questions. I would just say to my colleagues, I appreciate you yielding me this time. Because of this project, like in other projects there, walkability and safety is important, and this is something that the community has really had an outcry about. And I do appreciate staff sending me that information. I thought it would be important to share with the public as well. So thank you for the time.
No, thank you very much, Commissioner Stevenson. I couldn't agree more that the issues that you raised are completely worthy of bringing this forward for discussion. Any other commissioners wish to comment or ask questions about this application? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, abstentions? So the motion carries 11-2. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is a conditional use application for 1 Belmont Avenue. It's on page 27 of your packet. Before we do a motion, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to invite the applicant to speak to us for a few minutes. And then if the board has questions for staff, we're also here, or for the applicant. And then at the end of that, I will make the motion. Mr. Burson, do you or any of your representatives wish to be the people who wish to briefly address the board about this application?
Thank you.
This last week. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm George Brosman. Just have some comments, and then I'll turn it over to Bob Keene, the architect. With regard to, we're just discussing the step-back conditional use, which is seeking relief to modify the step-backs. We had an extensive discussion of that last time. Since then, we've provided to staff a supplemental exhibit that Mr. Keene will go through that shows on an overall basis the 2 buildings will have an average step back of over 10 feet. The 10 feet is required on a total basis. Looking at the 2 buildings together, the step back the area would be provided on an overall basis. We'd ask you to consider that, as well as the evidence brought forth at the conditional use hearing and in the hearing officer report, and the other information we presented last time. With that, I'd like Bob to briefly go over the supplemental sketch that his firm had prepared. Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Bob Kane with WDG Architecture. I guess you all have this in front of you, or I guess you can see it on the screen. As you're aware, Building B is on the bottom of the screen, Building A is on the top. The two buildings together, as George mentioned, when you take all the step backs and you add them all together, it's actually 10.1 feet deep. But we just wanted to make the point, a similar point that we made last week, which was what we have proposed is very much in the spirit of what the code intended to do, which is to create a strong pedestrian environment. And so we talked last time about this idea that we've actually, I think, gone a little bit above and beyond, in the sense that we've created a range and a variety of step backs that range from 10 feet to 6 feet and sometimes less. But the overall effect, when we walked around the building and looked at all the pedestrian environments, the overall effect, we believe, is a very strong pedestrian environment. And so, again, when you step back and you think about the fact you could have had a 120-foot building on the site and a 45-foot wall, we're talking about a 66-foot building and a 77-foot building, Building B and Building A respectively. And so when you're walking along the street and you're walking next to a wall that goes up approximately 22 to 23 feet and then it steps back 6 feet, that is very much in proportion to what the intent was when there was going to be a larger building there. And so, in addition to that, there's an incredible number of ins and outs in this building. So we could have built buildings that had very flat walls with an articulation every 50 feet if you followed the code by the letter of the law. We went way beyond that. We have articulations much more frequently. They're much wider than what was prescribed. So this building has a tremendous amount of relief, more than what was asked for. And in addition, we have these actual setbacks, which you can see in red up on the screen, substantial 44-foot setback at the public gathering space, and then a tapering 10-foot setback at the roundabout. So the building being proposed, if you look at it in aggregate and really add it all up, we have in fact provided the 10 feet required, slightly beyond. And we do that, the math is, you go around 3 sides of Building B, and then you go around all sides of Building A. The east side of Building B doesn't require the step back because it's not technically a road or a street. It's actually an internal access road. So when you do the math, and you do that perimeter and you multiply by 10 feet, and then you add up all the step backs that we've actually provided, like George said, we are actually slightly above what was actually required. So I think, we stand here, proud of the design, proud of the environment that we're proposing, and we think it is very, very appropriate and very much in keeping with the spirit of your building code. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So with that, any commissioner questions for staff or the applicant or comments? Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, President Sinai. And I see that our assistant director or our senior planner is coming to the podium, Jillian. So Jillian and I spoke today about the calculation, about the drawing, and about the step backs. Jillian, you explained to me 3 pretty good reasons for the step backs, and perhaps you want to share them with everybody. They're in addition to what has been said.
Yes. We talked about the intent of the step back, which is to provide or to mitigate the scale of the buildings. And as the applicant's architect had said, these are significantly, these are not as tall buildings as could be built on the site. So therefore, in this scenario, a reduced setback could be appropriate. There is a large step back on Building A along that internal roadway, and that does serve the purpose of mitigating the impact of scale. The other point that we talked about, and that I wasn't aware of, but the applicant had provided information between the Building and Planning Committee and this meeting, is that Building B, because it is a wrapped parking structure, there are design constraints. Having a wrapped parking structure is important, and because of the residential that's lined on the outside of the structure, that is something that provides a design limitation. And excuse me, but I don't remember the third point.
I think you said it looks better.
It does. I think it looks better. I think in some ways.
I think that's a technical term.
In some ways, a uniform 10-foot step back around both of these buildings would, I think I used the word, look weird.
Another technical term.
And I do think the variation and the variety of ins and outs are thoughtfully designed and appropriate. And I know design is subjective, and our code has kind of a standard requirement, and that's what's difficult because it doesn't always fit. And I think that's why we have these relief mechanisms built into the code for conditional use.
So, Jillian, thank you. That's very helpful. And I think that what was not at least referenced last week was that residential wrapping a garage is a design feature that is beneficial for a structure like this rather than an exposed garage. It's much more desirable to have it wrapped. And the calculation that was made is very helpful, at least to me. And I think not only for this project, but for going forward, to demonstrate compliance in a different way. I mean, this isn't the literal compliance, but I think it's beneficial.
Yes.
And I think it serves as a model for demonstrating, providing useful information. And so I think this goes a long way to justifying the relief sought. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Commissioner McComb?
I think Vice President Gavin had his hand up before mine, so
I'll defer to him. It's in word, okay, fine. Vice President Gavin.
I think Commissioner McComb, no. So a couple of comments. One, I want to thank the applicant for this additional work, and I don't doubt all of the good that's in there. The wrapped parking, I don't doubt that having a non-uniform step back is better than having a uniform step back. But to me, that's not what's required here. So I heard we went above, the first comment from the applicant was we went above and beyond. To me, that's not what happened. Saying that the average step back is 10.1 feet does not mean that you went above and beyond the requirement, which says that there has to be a minimum of 10-foot step back throughout the project. That's certainly a data point. It shows that there is some step back there. To me, you still have two massive buildings. They might not be the maximum height. They might not be 120 feet. The code never says that if a building is less than the maximum height, the step back has to be less as well. There's nothing that says it has to be uniform, and I appreciate that it's not uniform. I appreciate that it's not the maximum height. But if you look at these buildings compared to that blue building on the sheet that's currently there, these are still massive buildings, right? The difference in size is so clear just when you're looking at these three buildings compared to each other. We still have three massive buildings, and the point of the step back is not only, part of it is for the experience on the street, but the part of it is also, as it's written in the code, to mitigate the scale of these buildings. It does that to a degree, but in my mind, it doesn't do it enough. And we have this code requirement to set minimum standards, not to set maximum standards. They have to be at least 10 feet in all spots. And as the applicant said, in some spots it's 6 feet, in some spots it's 10 feet, in some spots it's more than 10. To me, not only does that not meet the letter of the law, it doesn't meet the spirit of the law, and it doesn't do enough to mitigate the scope and the size and the mass of these buildings, which is why I can't support this, because I think this is a really important piece of our code and something that's really important, that while you're getting part of the way there and doing something good, it's not fully meeting what we need from the code and not giving us the building that our code provides. So I can't support this for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Gavin. Commissioner McComb, may I call on you now?
Yes, you bet. Thank you, President. Sorry. I'm not going to repeat what I said at our last hearing, but I think it's important to put some things into context. And with all due respect to Vice President Gavin, who says the building's massive, it isn't. It's far smaller than Sutton. It's smaller than other buildings in the area. It's appropriate. I think that was the conclusion reached by our conditional use hearing officer, Pam Loughlin, who did a thorough, detailed job. I think that's a conclusion reached by the City Avenue Special Services District. We've heard from Brian Fenstermaker. I think it's noteworthy, Bob Kane's comment, that this creates a strong pedestrian environment. I've said this before. I think the success of all the development in this area is contingent upon connectivity. Can people get from one place to another without driving? And I think the applicant has made a concerted effort to make it pedestrian friendly with a courtyard, to make it accessible. And I think this is the type of project we want. It's going to focus on pedestrian activity, less on cars. So I don't think it's massive. I think it's appropriate in size. And I think if you look at the reasons for the conditional use application, they make perfect sense. They make it a better project. So I would ask everybody to support it. I think it's a very good project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. Other commissioners? Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to agree with both Vice President Gavin and Commissioner McComb. I'll agree with Vice President Gavin in connection with the scope or the size of it, and size does matter, and I think it is quite extensive, whether the word massive or whatever you want to utilize, and that's an issue. But I also think that the comments by Commissioner McComb and what Jillian has provided to us is what's going to drive the decision that I think that we need to make, and that is taking a look at what are the criteria for conditional use. And in our code, what it provides is that when the conditional use is applied for, that there's certain criteria it has to meet. It's got to show that it meets the conditions that are used for the classification of the chapter, and it does that. It does not conflict with the township or county comprehensive plans, and it meets that criteria. It is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the applicable zoning district. And by having that in there, it doesn't mean that it's got to have what we might call strict liability, but it has to meet that spirit and purpose and intent. And as much as I may personally not be in love with the project, no disrespect, it seems to comply with that. It's also in conformance with the applicable requirements of the chapter and municipal, state, and federal codes. We've already been told that it's suitable for the property in question. As the ward commissioner has pointed out, there's no issue in reference to public utilities. So while I may not be in love with this, I'm not a developer, but I sit here as a member of this board and then I have to note what are my obligations. And I think in reviewing very carefully, as I have on several occasions now, that which was submitted to us by our zoning board, by Ms. Loughlin, our conditional use officer, taking a look at the criteria, that there's a requirement to go ahead and acknowledge and approve that which was suggested to us for this conditional use. So hopefully that in going forward with this project, that everything to make it more friendly to the neighborhood, everything that can be done will be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Other commissioners? I just have, so everyone knows from last week. Oh, sorry, did I miss one? Okay. Commissioner Kramer. I don't need to go last, so. Oh, sorry, so I was looking at the screen and, so, do you mind if I go first? There's no reason for me to go last.
Go right ahead.
So I made my position clear last week. I think this like Commissioner Bernheim said, is in furtherance of the intent of the district. I'll note the following, right? The thing that is governing, I think, our sense of massiveness is the FAR that is allowed in this district, right? This building is built to a 1.75 FAR. which basically controls the volume of the building. And so, as the applicant said, it could be twice as tall, and if it was, it would have to have half the footprint, and it would be kind of like the same volume. It'd be just as big a building, just like on a smaller bit of land, and you wouldn't have the same streetscape that we're aiming to have, where we have sort of active storefronts along the streetscape. Define the streetscape. It would look like a suburban office building rather than one that's in this location. I appreciate the wrap garage. I'm on the record as appreciating wrap garages. There are density incentives for wrap garages, so you got 0.25 FAR for doing that. That may not be enough, but because I think this is a very important element. But having said that, I think the thing that's important for me is what Jillian said. It would look weird if you did it exactly to code. I think that's exactly the sentiment that I've been feeling the whole way through. And the point of the design intent here is to make an attractive streetscape that people want to walk down. And I think this helps that, and that's why there is some flexibility in the code. And given that no matter what we decided with the conditional use, I am convinced what we would get back is something that was 1.75 FAR, right? It'd be the exact same volume of building, just in a different shape and form and wrapper. I don't see a better shape and form and wrapper there than this one. I think this is the right one. So I too think this is in the intent of what our code does, and I think it meets the letter of our code. And therefore, I both, feel that it deserves to be supported. Commissioner Grimes, and I apologize for missing you before.
Not at all. You're the president. So I just wanted to say briefly, because others have made a lot of good points here. I am going to change my position from last week when I opposed this, and I am going to support the conditional use tonight. I am generally opposed to using conditional use in a lot of circumstances, and I regret in some sense that this is the second one we've been asked to do in the City Avenue area in 3 weeks, I think. But I do also think that that the commissioners who have spoken in favor of this and also our staff have made very compelling arguments, as did the applicant, for why it should be granted in this situation. Also, I note that Commissioner McComb, who's the ward commissioner, is very strongly in favor. So I am changing my position this time in the view of those compelling arguments, and I'm prepared to support this. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Okay, any other commissioners, anyone I missed? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to make a motion. So I'm going to move that we adopt a resolution approving the conditional use application. And that approval is pursuant to zoning code section 155.66E to A, deviate from the build to line requirement as required by zoning code section 155.66D1 to provide increased building setbacks, and B, to deviate from the building configuration standards as required by zoning code section 155.66D1F to not provide building step backs. I think that's it. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. So since I just made the motion, I do need to say, does anyone else have any further comment? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Do you have a count? Okay. Opposed? 3. Okay. Abstentions? Madam Secretary, what was the vote?
11 to 2.
I got 10 to 3. I got
10-3.
Ricky, yeah. Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
I can't see this side of the table unless I see
my nose,
Okay. I will admonish my colleague to sit up straight. Okay.
Just mirrors. Or we could get a booster seat for Joe.
Okay. Okay. So that item passes. So the next item on our agenda is tentative sketch for 1 Belmont Avenue. It is on page 35 of our packet. And I will make a motion. I move that we approve.
No, it's not. It's on page 20.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that is
27.
29. Sorry. Yes, I jumped ahead. Thank you. It is 29. Okay, so this is the tentative sketch plan for 1 Belmont Avenue, and I move that we approve a tentative sketch plan dated November 1st, 2021, prepared by Bowler Engineering, that shows the construction of 2 buildings. Building A is a 7-story building with a 34,362 square foot footprint located at the corner of St. Asaph's Road and Belmont Avenue, containing 2,690 square feet of ground floor commercial area, 160 residential dwelling units, and 33 internal parking spaces. Building B is a 5-story building with a 71,111 square foot footprint located at the intersection of City Avenue and Belmont Avenue, containing 24,800 square feet of ground floor commercial area, 118 residential dwelling units, and a wrapped parking structure with 608 parking spaces. The plan also shows the construction of a 17,215 square foot public gathering space, internal private roadways, and streetscape amenities. Do I have a second? Commissioner McComb, thank you. Any commissioner questions or comments? As usual, we have the applicant and staff here. Commissioner Zoff.
President Stein, I'd like to ask the board to consider amending one of the conditions for the tentative sketch plan. It will be entirely consistent with amendments that I made last week to a different preliminary plan for a mixed-use structure. And I'll look to Jillian. I think it belongs in condition 18. And the motion I want to make is to make an improvement to this project. And it would be much better if we did more to have the applicant ensure that the commercial space, of which there's almost 30,000 square feet of at-grade commercial space, that would be occupied, because that's been an issue in existing buildings, and I've raised the issue on some recent approvals. So I think that it belongs at the end of condition 18. Does that make sense to you?
And you're talking about a retail strategy.
So the amendment would be to add a phrase at the end of condition 18, says that the applicant would consider subsidies to ensure occupancy of the commercial space. Am I in the right place in the conditions?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
That would be an appropriate location for it.
Please go ahead.
To my colleague, can you clarify what do you mean by subsidies, the subsidy piece?
Well, in a typical transaction, the tenant would pay the rent to the property owner. And that may not happen, at least in some other new mixed-use developments in our township. There is significant vacant commercial space. The rent could be zero. A subsidy means that the property owner would pay the retail or restaurant to occupy the space so it's to ensure occupancy.
Thank you.
Now, I don't mean, so it's a private subsidy. President Stein, I would move to amend your motion to add at the end of condition 18, and consider subsidies to ensure occupancy.
Okay, so while I understand the spirit of the amendment, I think we'll need a second.
I was seconding for
Okay.
discussion.
Yes, okay, we had a couple of seconds. Before we have commissioner discussion, Mr. Bursman, do you want to have the opportunity to address that? Or you or the applicant? Okay, so while you're, so we'll have our commissioner discussion while we're waiting. So any commissioner comments?
If I could, President Stein, just
Yes.
to add to what I've said, is emphasize the word consider. This is not a requirement. This is asking the applicant to consider that as an option in ensuring, with the goal of ensuring that the commercial space is occupied.
Okay, understood, Commissioner Zoff. So any other commissioner
Making sure the
who
applicant
wish to have questions or comments about this amendment? Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, thank you very much. And while I completely appreciate what you're trying to accomplish here, Commissioner Zoff, because time and time again, we've watched these mixed-use buildings come forward, and what we're observing, if you drive down Presidential Boulevard, you see it at what's called the Luxor, the commercial space is empty. We had somebody else come forward to us at for 111 Presidential Boulevard to try to explain why they were going to be different, and with all due respect to them, they didn't present anything that we haven't heard before, and we can reasonably anticipate that a lot of this commercial space is going to continue to be vacant. Thus, the desire to try to do something to encourage that, that's good. However, the plan is not. In that, first, I think that it needs to be clear that even in presenting this, it is not the intent of this board to say to this group or any others, when we make a suggestion like this, gee, if you don't do this, then you may not get a vote, because this is not something which is specifically, within our code. It's something that we're trying to better a project. So win, lose, or draw, the vote will be what the vote will be. This is merely a request. But in making this request, to say to someone to consider a subsidy, as Commissioner Stevenson was very quick to point out, what does that mean? And we have no definition to it. And when we go to put on something, even to consider a condition which is vague enough that it has no definition to it, the entire condition then therefore has no meaning, and we can't enforce it. We can't do anything about it one way or the other. And the problem then becomes, by merely making the suggestion, and notwithstanding, and I know your intent is not to coerce the applicants to do something that we can't enforce, and I've made that clear by my comment, the fear is that that gets somehow put into someone's mind, that we're not doing that. So I think that in order to enhance commercial spaces, we need the applicants to come forward to us with some type of game plan that they're going to be able to promote, tell us what is they're going to do, because they don't want that vacant space. Sometimes it's a lost leader for them, but they need to explain to us, here's what our plan is. And when they tell us that, then maybe we can make that a condition that they need to adhere to the plan as it goes forward. But for us to come forward and say, we're going to tell you how to run your business, I have a little bit of difficulty with that and what our capabilities are as members of this board. So this is something, while the intent is good, in order to do this, it's not something that I can support, and I would suggest to my colleagues, we need to have a better way of trying to figure out what we can do to make sure that the commercial space indeed has commercial occupants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bernheim. Commissioner McCann.
Thank you. I actually was talking to Commissioner Bernheim about a very similar issue for a case I had, and so this, we talked about this after the last meeting too. I see this as really a private matter between landlords and tenants. For a case I was dealing with my own job, there's a co-tenancy requirement in a lease where a commercial shopping center has to have a very large retail anchor tenant in there, and if that anchor tenant isn't present, the other tenants get 30–40% off their lease for the month. And that's put in there as a part of a private agreement between tenants and landlord, because if you have the large retailer there, that brings in enough foot traffic, and then that helps the other businesses do well. So it acts as a little bit of a penalty provision if the foot traffic doesn't come in to help the other businesses out. And those things are contracted regularly in landlord-tenant commercial leases. I don't think that it's our job as a municipal board to enter that realm. It could be for something like this, that perhaps in the lease agreements, the landlord decides to reduce the rent for tenants, whether they're commercial or residential, based on the commercial occupancy. But I just think that is a separate area, as good of an idea as it is to try to do what we can to help the struggling commercial sector in our township.
So I'm going to jump in here and then ask the applicant to answer just a question or two. And I'm delighted that Commissioner McKeon brought up the notion of co-tenancy agreements, because I think that's exactly the issue that's at the heart of the spirit of what Commissioner Zeloff was proposing. And leaving aside the issue of whether it's appropriate to put it as a condition, I think it is completely appropriate for the kind of thing for a municipality to think about exactly those issues. And for example, what is the impetus in our zoning code to have activated commercial streetscapes? Let me just be clear, our code does not require retail on the ground floor here. It requires active commercial activity. And so, that is just a way of having an active streetscape. So what does it mean? Well, we have an entire area that's been rezoned on the premise that if one part is active and energized, it's going to lift up the other parts. And if those other parts are active and energized, it's going to lift up the others. So Commissioner McKeon's co-tenancy argument, which is why does, a retail store insist on a co-tenancy, clause in their lease, is because if the anchor tenant disappears, they're going to get no foot traffic, they're not going to sell anything, they don't want to pay as much rent. Well, it's exactly this. So what is going on the ground floor here? To a degree, it's an anchor tenant for the rest of the City Avenue district. And what's going on in other parts of the City Avenue district is anchor tenants for the other City Avenue districts. And there's no reason for any individual property owner to take into account what's happening to their neighbors, because they're not going to financially benefit from us. So who takes that into account? That is the role of a municipality in doing some of the planning. So that's why we have planning. That's why we have these things in the zoning code. Now, can we put something in the condition that says you must, maintain activity? Well, we obviously can't do that. That's not what Commissioner Zoloff has proposed. He said, can you consider it? So I'm going to ask a question to the applicant, which is, maybe you could just tell us if our concern here is that we will have great vacant space on the ground floor, and we recognize that if we mandated occupancy, then I think as someone would say, well, if you can't get a tenant, you'll go bankrupt, and everyone will be bankrupt. Like, what is your plan for having occupancy, and like, what is the economics of the building, and how does your ground floor play into your residential and your commercial, and like, do you actually internalize these issues so we don't have to be concerned?
I appreciate the question. I appreciate the lead-in. I'm Rich Gottlieb. I'm president of Keystone, now Development Investments, formerly Keystone Property Group. And we don't want to see vacant space on the first floor either, Commissioner Zoloff. And I appreciate what your intent is here, because as a landlord, we want to lease our space. That's what we want to do. And the first floor sets the tone. At Keystone, we've been investing in Bala, Cynwyd for around 15 years. We've been here. We make sure our spaces are leased as best we possibly can. We have a property, One Presidential, that's next door to Luxor. We've worked very hard to keep that space leased as best we could. We were told there was going to be retail space at a retail broker. We created this retail space. We didn't really get retail there. We got offices that wanted residential exposure, or retail exposure, excuse me. But we have a history of creating mixed-use developments. We're completing something in Conshohocken right now. It's a mixed-use development that's working out really well. We've done things in Center City where we turned neighborhoods around. That Sixth and Market was a dead zone before we got there, and we took the risk of putting in a beer garden and spending a lot of money on the entrance so we could put a La Colombe in there. Funny story is, we did a big lease in the building, no one cared, but we did a 1,500 square foot La Colombe, and reporters were calling me to interview me because that was all that was important, because that's what people really understand. Well, this is our home base. My partner Bill Glazer and I, we live in Lower Merion. Bill grew up in Wynnewood. We are not going to do a project that's going to fail here. It's just not going to happen anywhere, but it's especially not going to happen here. And to do that, we haven't done a lot of apartments, and we haven't this particular type. So we brought in what we felt, after a lot of interviewing, was the best partner we could have, and that's Bizzuto. They're one of the most prolific developers on the East Coast. They're probably the largest manager in this region and other parts of the country, and they got project after project they can show you of success with mixed use. We do have activity here and interest. It's nice to want retail and to want it, but if it's not in the right location, at any price a retailer will not come. There are places that zero rent is too expensive, because you're just not going to get the activity. You still got to staff it and everything else. So, and we do subsidize. In a typical transaction, we're putting in, rent is just one component. We're also putting in tenant improvement dollars into the store to help them, and the better the business plan, the better the retailer, the more dollars they request and often get. Because we want good retailers in there too, not just people to take up space. So we're excited about this project. We're at a major intersection. We're across from the shopping center. This is where retail should be, and we've already gotten some interest. And our brokers are really excited about it too. This is what they do for a living, and they only make money if they find us a tenant and we complete a lease. So they're very excited. I don't know if you want to add anything, Pete, but thank you. Unless any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gottlieb. And so I will turn to other commissioners, but let me just say, Commissioner Zoff, I completely understand the spirit in which your condition is intended, and I agree that with what Commissioner Bernheim said, which is, this is something that we need to incorporate into our planning in Lower Merion to make sure that these areas are not just built to a nice aesthetic, but they are economically vibrant. Commissioner Whalen.
Yes, thank you, President Sinai. I think I agree generally with the idea that we need to incorporate this, more into our overall planning process. Mr. Gottlieb said everything we needed him to say. Obviously, this is a known developer with a known track record, dozens of years here, right across the river. Not an issue in this circumstance. What I think Commissioner Zeloff is doing is the right thing. We are setting up, for lack of a better word, to inflame everyone, a billboard to say, we as the commissioners, we as the township, really want you to pay attention to your retail space. This is not an inappropriate statement on behalf of the commissioners in any way, shape, or form. I have to disagree with Commissioners Bernheim and McKeon on this. It's not inappropriate for us. It's not extortionist. I think all of those terms are loaded, and it is to consider. Commissioner Zeloff said, hey, why don't you think about? You could think about it for a second, you could think about it for a day. Maybe subsidies isn't the right word that everyone likes to hear. Maybe it's also a loaded term. Maybe this could be overall decided better. But as we're looking forward, again, not necessarily with this project, but with all projects, I completely support Commissioner Zeloff's decision here to have some kind of clause in there to say, we want you to look at all options for getting retail into mixed-use developments, because we as a township are trying to get mixed-use developments, and we have not been able to do so. And all we're trying to do is put out the statement that we'd like people to consider that. Consider is not binding on anyone. It's not impactful. It's really just a general statement, and once it is added into the planning process, then maybe we don't need this in the condition, and we can just cite to it in the code. But until that time it comes forward, I'm in full support of Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Any other commissioners with questions or comments on this proposed amendment? So I need to ask at this point, before we vote, is this a amendment that would be acceptable to the applicant or not? Mr. Roseman, do you want? Yes. Yeah, it would be? Okay. Okay, so with that, we are going to vote on the amendment. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Well, if it's acceptable to the...
We don't need to vote?
Why not, then it...
Okay, sure, okay.
Just to vote the whole thing as, amended by the
acceptance. So Commissioner Bernheim, I was leaving over the open opportunity that some people would not want to add it on principle, because they did not think it was appropriate, and so I was not going to presuppose. So if you will allow me to vote.
Yep.
Okay.
Good point.
So all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. So 4, 5, 6, 7, is that 8? Okay. Did I count that right? Opposed? Yeah. 4? Did I miss someone? Abstentions? Oh, Mr. Grimes, sorry.
He was in favor.
He was in favor, so 9. Okay, 9-4.
9-4.
I was in favor.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So we have that amendment passes. Okay. Any other commissioner comments or questions on the motion as amended? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on, I think we had the motion, it was seconded, it was amended, right? Okay, so we will vote on the tentative sketch. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, any opposed? Abstentions? All right, so that motion carries, I believe, 12-1. So the next item on our agenda is the Historical Commission application for St. Charles Seminary, which is on page 35 of your packet. And I'm going to move that we refer this to back to the Building and Planning Committee on request of the applicant. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Sean Kramer. Any discussion? Commissioner, questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that motion carries.
Unanimously?
I believe it does, yes. So the next item is, I believe, our public hearings, adoptions of the ordinances, correct, Madam Secretary?
Yes.
Okay. So now we have the public hearing and adoption of ordinance chapter 126, sewers, the sanitary sewer rental rate for 2022. And I will open the public hearing, and I will start with our township manager to provide an explanation.
Commissioners, this one is easy. You've talked about this in the past. Our sewer fund is in good shape, as reported by our Chief Financial Officer. This ordinance is proposed to keep the sewer rate at the same rate, so it is not an increase. It is simply reaffirming the current rate for sewer service in the township.
Thank you, Manager McKinley. This is the point we go to public comment. Does anyone in the room wish to make comment on this ordinance? Seeing none. Joe, do you have anyone online?
We do not.
And nothing was submitted in advance? Okay. So that we will close the public hearing, and I will move that we adopt ordinance number 4242, which is an ordinance enacted pursuant to the Code of Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 126 Sewers, fixing the amount of the annual sanitary sewer rental fee and establishing the amount of $4.51 as the charge to each property connected to the township's sanitary sewer system for each 1,000 gallons of water consumed, and fixing the amount of the annual sanitary sewer rental fee for each property directly connected to the City of Philadelphia sanitary sewer system as that amount charged by the City of Philadelphia for such service. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held April 20th, 2022, and duly advertised in the May 1st, 2022 and May 8th, 2022 editions of the Mainline Times and Suburban. Do I have a second? Vice President Gavin. Any questions for staff or comments by the board? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Public comment.
We did public comment.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So,
We did the public hearing.
Okay.
Did you? Okay, so you did have a second on that.
Right.
Okay. For the adoption of ordinance 4242, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Zella.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. So Manager McNeely, noting that tonight is not my finest hour in running this meeting, is trying to just mess in my head a little more.
There you are.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is a public hearing and adoption of ordinance for our subdivision and land development ordinance, chapter 135, amending this chapter in its entirety. We'll open the public hearing, and Mr. Lesswing, are you going to be doing this via Zoom? Okay, I'll turn to you, our Director of Building and Planning, to explain where we are on the Saldo.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinai. Tonight what we have is a public hearing for a complete revision to Chapter 135, the Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance. This is a continuing update to our code. It follows on the date of the zoning code in 2020, and this is very similar in the effort. The Subdivision and Land Development Code complements the zoning code, and everything that we've done is consistent with the 2016 comprehensive plan. This is a really big deal. This helps to further align township codes with the comprehensive plan. I would say that we're one of the few communities actually in southeastern Pennsylvania that has adopted comprehensive plan and then has
undertaken the big community efforts to update the zoning and the subdivision codes. So tonight with this, I'm also going to explain two other items on the agenda. One is a small ordinance to bring about various amendments for consistency with the zoning code. And then there's another ordinance for various amendments for consistency with the natural features code. Many of our codes work together, and these other ordinances are important for the cross references between the three codes. I'm just going to share my screen and just have a couple slides for everybody tonight to share along. So the subdivision code is intended to create a functional, attractive development consistent with the community's vision, goals, and policies. Many of the same things that we were just talking about in the Building and Planning Committee. The big difference between the zoning code and the subdivision code is that the zoning code outlines the uses and the bulk area standards for things that are happening on a property, while the subdivision code provides many of the form standards, many of those issues that we just talked about with the conditional use. The reason why we had to have the conditional use was those form standards were previously put into the zoning code. If those form standards were in the subdivision code, it would have been a much different process of just a normal waiver as opposed to going through a conditional use process. The big key to the subdivision and land development code is applicable to the subdivision and land development code, and it really evolves around the development of or the definition of land development, and that includes improvements involving 2 or more residential buildings or 1 or more non-residential structure, regardless of the number of occupants, subdivision of land, but then there's also some elements by the municipality's planning code that are excluded from land development. The conversion of an existing single-family detached dwelling or single-family semi-detached dwelling, which we call twins in the township, into not more than 3 residential units, unless the units are intended to be a condominium. And also the additions of accessory buildings, including farm buildings, on a lot with an existing principal building. On the slide that I have up on the screen, I'm showing the word residential. The township's definition uses the word residential. This was added through our lengthy public process. There was concern about accessory buildings on institutional campuses. This was brought forward. Staff, talking to the township solicitor, added the word residential accessory building to try to clarify this, to basically say that what this was referring to as an exclusion wasn't a dorm on a college campus, but really just a shed. This issue was brought up when we were advertising the ordinance a couple months ago. Since that time, staff has talked to solicitor, we've reviewed this. What we would like to do is remove that word residential. We want to remove that word residential after we adopt the ordinance. If we went to remove that word tonight, we would have to re-advertise the entire ordinance, and it would probably be 45 to 60 days before we could bring it back. If the ordinance is adopted this evening, and we come back in the June cycle, it'll actually be quicker to amend that. There is no exposure to the township. We feel this is really just semantics. But by removing the word residential, the township's definition of land development will be exactly the definition in its municipality's planning code. This was merely an attempt to clarify things, but I think we can bring this forward and remove this in the June cycle. Through the entire process, there's been significant changes to the saldo between the old saldo and the new saldo. The old saldo was thin. It was this new saldo is about 3-4 times longer because it includes a lot more form standards. Form standards are much more important to the township, as is sustainability. So some of the major changes are incorporation of sustainability standards, EV charging stations, and specific standards for EV charging. A real focus on active transportation, walkability. We've added provisions for complete streets. We've also removed cul-de-sacs as a permitted street type. The only calls that we've received about this are from realtors, because the major thing that this will do is reduce density, particularly in the western part of the township. When large estates are subdivided, the most common form of development is a cul-de-sac. because it's very efficient. You can generate a lot of units. Cul-de-sacs are dead ends. They remove connectivity throughout the township to make walkability much more difficult. By removing a cul-de-sac, it'll help with many of the goals of the comprehensive plan of connectivity, walkability, and also reducing inappropriate residential development by having just more units shoved onto a site. This new code also enhances public gathering space standards and has increased landscape standards. And then there's some new requirements for special studies and reports. Some of these things were talked about earlier in the Building and Planning Committee, but some of these will help as we go forward, a community impact assessment, and then also adding provisions for transportation demand management. After the SALDO is adopted, hopefully this evening, staff will be bringing forward some additional standards for the zoning code to further flesh out the transportation demand management requirements. So this has been a lengthy process. Most of this was done in-house and in cooperation with the Montgomery County Planning Commission. There's been numerous drafts, and I'm proud to say that these drafts have been very transparent and very constructive. The way the township goes about our planning efforts is we release a draft, we turn it over to the public, we walk it through civic associations, advisory bodies, and throughout that process, people start thinking, people start contributing. And we've had 3 previous drafts. What's being advertised tonight is draft 3.1, but we first brought this forward in October with draft 1.0. In January, we had draft 2.0. We had draft 3.0 in February. Each of these drafts incorporated comments from the Board of Commissioners, advisory bodies, and staff. But draft 3.0 is what's been advertised and is ready for adoption. And as I mentioned, we had the lengthy public process. We had over 700 edits and comments that were brought forward. That's really significant for a public process, and it's something I think from planning staff that we're very proud of. One of the things that we've tried to do is create an environment where our community and our commissioners and our advisory bodies feel that they're part of a process. And with this, as you can see, that we've had good participation. I think that's really a testament to that public process. Many of these comments came from our advisory bodies, and this is just kind of a tally sheet that we kept together. You'll see that LMT staff also added many comments because we were revising it along the way as well to public comment and looking to make some of the changes to make sure the code achieved what we wanted it to achieve, translating those comments into actionable code language. At the bottom here, you'll also see there's a line on here about testing results. Much like the zoning code, the subdivision code was tested. Montgomery County Planning Commission, working with the township, tested many of the challenges or many of the sections of the code over many days. They actually gave us a report. We brought that back, and there were 19 significant changes that were brought back into the code based on that testing, for a total of 717 comments. Where were these comments? They were mostly in the guts of this new code, which deals with design standards and landscape standards. This is 500, which is more the bulk of all of those comments. And this is just a quick sheet to show how we were tracking this. These are all available online. As I say, this has been a very open, transparent process where we're showing the track changes. We're showing if it was included. Not all the comments were included. There were some ideas that were good in concept, but the actual language that was used was then further refined somewhere else. As I mentioned, there were numerous changes, and we just kept track of that between draft 2.0 to draft 3.0. And then finally, what was advertised included these 3 major changes that have been incorporated into 3.1, adding the word institutional in section 1.1F, revising the title of section 4.8, and then modifying table 1118 to increase the per cost trip for Rock Hill Road Transportation Services area. There are also 2 other complementary ordinances that are a little bit further on in your agenda. One are cross-references for the zoning code, and the other for cross-references for the natural features code. This has been brought forward to the Planning Commission, and we've also received a letter from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Both of the Planning Commissions recommended approval of the zoning code and also the other cross-referencing ordinances. I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and staff recommends adopting the ordinance this evening.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris, and I'll underscore just how impressive the effort was to engage with the public and get public comment, and especially with our advisory boards and getting their comments, which I think have significantly improved the subdivision and land development code and made it even more forward-looking and progressive. So any question, so first, public comment? Anyone in the room wish to make public comment on this? Okay, Jody, do you have anyone online for public comment?
There's no one online.
No, online still. They have not hopped in. Okay. So we'll close the public hearing, and I'm going to start by making a motion for this. I'll move that we adopt an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 135, Subdivision and Land Development Code, amending that chapter in its entirety, revoking the text as it now appears, and adopting the text attached, including specifically the following articles. Article 1, General Provisions. Article 2, Definitions. Article 3, Plan Filing, Processing, and Review. Article 4, Design Standards. Article 5, Landscape Standards. Article 6, Mobile Home Park Standards. Article 7, Improving Construction Requirements. Article 8, Special Studies and Reports. Article 9, Administration Fees and Reports. Article 10, Amendments, Validity and Repealer. And Article 11, Traffic Impact Fee. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held March 16th, 2022, and duly advertised in the May 1st, 2022 and May 8th, 2022 editions of the Mainline Times and Suburban. Thank you, Vice President Gavin, for that second. So any commissioner questions for staff or comments on the subdivision land development ordinance? All right, seeing none, I guess it is time for a vote. Madam Secretary.
For the adoption of ordinance 4243, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Aye.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. With that, we turn to page 50 of your packet for the public hearing and adoption of the ordinance of Chapter 155 zoning code, various amendments for consistency with the proposed subdivision land development ordinance. This is what our Director of Building and Planning, Chris Lesswing, was telling us was the additional kind of cleanups, the cross references to the code that reference the saldo. So I will open the public hearing. Does anyone in the room wish to make comment on this ordinance? No. Jody, still no one online? Correct. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I move an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 155, entitled Zoning, Article 2, Definitions, to amend the definitions of electric vehicle charging station, and electric vehicle parking space, to add definitions for electric vehicle charging levels, Level 3, and electric vehicle readiness standards, to remove the definition of electric vehicle charging station infrastructure, and to amend Article 3 general districts by adjusting references to other sections of the Lower Merion Code to accurately refer to them. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at a special meeting of the Board of Commissioners held April 6, 2022, and duly advertised in the May 1st, 2022 and May 8th, 2022 editions of the Times Herald. Thank you, Vice President Gavin, for that second. Any commissioner questions for staff or comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll for that.
For the adoption of ordinance 4244, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Aye.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Aye.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We now turn to page 58 of your packet for the adoption of ordinance for Chapter 101, Natural Features Conservation, which again are amendments for consistency with the proposed saldo. So I'm going to move for the adoption, because we've already had public comment on this. I'm going to move that we enact an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of Lower Merion, Chapter 101, Natural Features Conservation, Articles 1 through 4, to revise the definition of wooded lot, to correct site references to other portions of the Township Code, to establish a new set of minimum planting standards for residential and non-residential development, to mandate compliance with the Subdivision Land Development Code's landscape requirements, rather than establish similar requirements in Chapter 101, to remove provisions for planting street trees in the preparation of a conservation plan which conflict with the subdivision land development code. This ordinance was authorized for advertisement at the stated meeting of the Board of Commissioners held March 16th, 2022, and duly advertised in the May 1st, 2022 and May 8th, 2022 editions of the Mainline Times and Suburban. Do I have a second? Vice President Gavin, thank you. Any questions for staff or Commissioner comments on this item? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on this.
For the adoption of ordinance 4245, Mr. Bernheim.
Aye.
Mr. Churchill.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Gavin.
Yes.
Mr. Grimes.
Yes.
Ms. S. Kramer.
Yes.
Ms. G. Kramer.
Yes.
Mr. McComb.
Yes.
Mr. McKeon.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson. Mr. Whalen.
Yes.
Mr. Zello.
Aye.
Mr. Sinai.
Yes.
The ordinance is duly adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the board? Seeing none. Any new business to come before the board? Seeing none, that closes the May 18th, 2022 meeting of Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We are now adjourned.
Well done, sort of.
Yeah.